Yes, a very good morning. Thank you so much for being a part of Issues at Hand this morning. It is a new week, and we are glad that you are right here with us. Monday, September the 25th, the month is fast spent, and we are going towards the end of the year. I hope if you set goals for the beginning of at the beginning of this year, for this year, I hope that you have reached somewhere in achieving them. And of course, today the weather is very, very clear. It's not raining as it is every morning, and so if you are planning to go to work, it is a very, very good morning, and you can get out and go to work comfortably without the rain disorganizing you. My name is Caro Amani, and it's Caro Amani on social media platforms as well. But today I'm here to discuss the plight of corruption in our country. How far are we in the fight against corruption? Of course, corruption is a very wide topic. When I start talking about it, an hour might not be enough. Remember, we are powered by Protea Hotel, by Marriott Entebbe. Comfort and luxury at its best. Of course, they do have a number of services that you should go out there and check out. Of course, my guest in studio this morning is from Transparency International, a body that I think fights corruption. He's going to tell us more about it. His name is David Kicito. You're welcome to studio this morning.
Thank you, Caro, and to the viewers out there. We continue to greet you. Good morning, Uganda.
Okay, tell us about Transparency International in brief.
Transparency International is it's a civil society organization like any other.
Okay.
And we operate in over 100 countries globally. So Transparency International Uganda, now the local chapter, subscribes to the global movement that tries to fight corruption globally. And most of our work and our mandate is strictly on fighting corruption and combating wastage of public resources. So for those that know us out there, we are mainly very popular for the Corruption Perceptions Index. That's the annual global report on corruption. So we rank countries and give them a score by their perceived level of corruption. In Uganda, we've been around for about 30 years now, because we were founded in 1993. So this year we make our 30th anniversary. And a lot has changed over time. And as we see the trends in fighting corruption, I think things keep on changing, and also the approach keeps on evolving. Briefly, that's about us.
Okay. How about, you've mentioned that you rank countries.
Yeah.
Could you rank Uganda? How is Uganda doing?
Because now the current Corruption Perceptions Index is comparable since 2012. And the highest score we got over the last 10 years is 29 out of 100. This year we backslid a bit. We scored 26 out of 100 when it comes to fighting corruption out there. But also our position was 142 out of the 180 countries ranked globally. Okay. So we are not doing so well. The fight against corruption is still, I think, a long way. Our National Development Plan target gives us a target of 35 out of 100 in the CPI. I think the best we've done in the last 5 years was 28 out of 100 in 2019, but since then we've been on a descending trajectory.
Okay. 28, 26, those are very, very low numbers.
Exactly.
Where could the problem be? Because we have a whole inspectorate of government that runs the fight against corruption, and we would think that this percentage might have risen up. What's the challenge? What's causing?
I think borrowing a leaf from our neighboring countries, because in the region we rank the fourth. We are behind Rwanda, Tanzania, and Kenya. But borrowing from mainly Rwanda and Tanzania, I think their strength in the institutional framework has surpassed what we currently do in Uganda, but also the implementation of the legislation framework, but also the level of coordination, especially in Rwanda, when it comes to these anti-corruption agencies, I think it's far much better than Uganda. So when you look at the ranking, Rwanda scored beyond the global average, because the global average was 43 out of 100. So Rwanda's current score is about 53 out of 100, which is far much better than most of the countries in the sub-Saharan region. Then when it comes to Tanzania, most of their attributes are towards the political, willingness to combat corruption, because their trend started during the times of the late President Magufuli. And since then, you see that Tanzania has been performing better and better. So back in Uganda, I think we have all those problems packed in one. When you look at how we implement our anti-corruption laws, when you look at the strength of these institutions, the level of coordination when it comes to fighting corruption, investigating corruption cases, when it comes to the capacity of these institutions to investigate and prosecute cases of corruption, I think we are doing very, very badly. But also when you look at the basics and the fundamentals of fighting corruption, for example, the access to information laws, I think we are also doing very badly when it comes to their implementation. Because there is a study by our partners, the Anti-Corruption Coalition, where out of the so many requests that were made even to the Inspectorate of Government, about only 5 were granted. So that shows that we are still a long way to go. But that's amid these other challenges.
Interesting. Let's start by, could you tell us the factors that enable corruption, especially in Uganda? Can we start from the grassroots?
What is the grassroots?
Yeah.
I think in Uganda, one of the key factors is that we see a lot of apathy among the citizens. So when projects are being implemented and there is this resource wastage, most of the citizens prefer to turn a blind eye. And that's one of the key drivers to corruption in Uganda, because we believe if citizens are not part of the fight against corruption, all our efforts won't yield any results. But also leaving it from the citizens, the fact that information is not easily and readily accessible, that makes then monitoring of government programs very difficult. For example, how much can citizens in the local communities translate their budgets into service delivery? If they are constructing a health facility, if they are constructing a school, if they are delivering medicines in these health facilities, how informed are these citizens that they can ably monitor and be able to inform the duty bearers that so much was supposed to be delivered but so little was actually delivered. Then besides that, we see some elements of the syndicate nature of corruption that then makes it very hard to investigate. Corruption has so many players, and before a scheme is successfully orchestrated, there are so many people that come into play.
Yes.
So when we report most of these cases, tracing these trails is not normally very, very easy, and that also affects the success of investigations and prosecutions by especially the anti-corruption agencies, but also the fact that most of the citizens are not willing to report. They see the things happening, but the actual reporting is very minimal. We have put in place toll-free lines, we have put in place various reporting measures and channels, but still these reports don't come in handy. And I think also the fact that we operate in a scope where citizens don't feel safe, and also the laws may not give them the liberty to freely report. In some countries we have the witness protection laws, whereby even if the case is high level, high nature, citizens can freely report because they know the state will protect them. But in Uganda we currently don't have such laws, as much as we have the Whistleblowers Protection Act, but the actual witness protection laws are missing. So I think citizens fear that victimization, and they would rather keep silent than reporting.
Okay, we've said there is lack of information. Where is this information supposed to come from? Why is it lacking?
The information is supposed to come from the public agencies. So these include the ministries, They include the local governments, it can be parliament, any public agency is supposed to actually give information to the citizens. However, over time, I think our access has been changing, and now the preferences are much different. For example, we are in the digital era where we would want this information to be readily available on the internet, but that is still lacking. So if you don't have this information on the websites, on the social media channels, and on all these other channels, that means that citizens have to make the request through the accounting officers. So this could be the permanent secretaries, they could be the chief administrative officers, or the heads of the agencies like the executive directors. However, over time we've noted that some of the requests for information are either delayed or denied. And there are reasons to deny of information. For example, secrecy, infringement on privacy, issues relating to national security, but also the fact that some agencies tell you that the reasons for requesting for this information is actually not very clear, so that alone can be based on to grant to deny information. But also when it comes now to the local communities, the target, we've had issues of how much do they understand this information. If I'm a local business person and you give me BOQs of a construction site, it will be as good as useless unless you tell me that we shall use so and so much bricks, we shall use so much bags of cement, and those simple understandable things. So the language to which this information sometimes is provided to the citizens is not actually in the right channel. But also there was a request that in some cases information should be interpreted into the language that citizens understand. Like we do when we are hit by Ebola, when we are hit by COVID, that at least you try to translate this information in the local languages, because that then informs the uptake of the information. Because our literacy levels, we must all agree, are still very high.
Thank you. You mentioned also that the witnesses are not... there is no law to protect the witnesses. So I'm wondering, how safe are the citizens who want to report these cases?
In the event that we are operating in the vacuum of lack of witness protection laws, there have been quite some mechanisms put in place. For example, there was a case where an officer at the Inspectorate of Government was prosecuted. And the reason was there was a whistleblower who reported the case. Then this officer went and informed the respondent that there is a case against you, and if you give me so much, I can take over the investigation and try to make things in your favor. And there are also, I think this mainly happens with the police, that just after, even before you leave the premises of the police, the person you're reporting has already received a call that, I know you've reported me on so and such a case, but you just know I'm watching you. So in that vacuum, agencies have put in place anonymous reporting channels that you can report without unmasking your face. And by doing this, it's actually geared towards protecting the whistleblowers. However, now the biggest challenge is that there are some Ugandans that will report, and they'll also want everyone to know that they have actually reported a case. So someone calls the IG, then after calling, he tells the entire neighborhood that I've actually reported to the IG. So in such a case, there is no way even the agency itself can protect you. So I think for now we are mainly encouraging citizens to report anonymously. That's through emails, through the toll-free lines like the ones at Nakalema, so that then it's up to the agents to use the information you give them to the right cause.
Okay. So apart from the Inspectorate of Government, which ones are the other agencies, maybe even Transparency International, which are the other agencies that are supposed to fight corruption? Which are the concerned agencies to fight corruption?
Uganda, we have a mouthful of agencies. Actually, it's a huge basket of them. And currently, we will also have a State House Investors Protection Agency. And that's now geared towards shielding investors from corruption, from, defraudment and all those things. But besides that, we have, I think the newly created one is the State House Protectors. It has a name, but State House Investors Protection Agency. Then we have the State House Anti-Corruption Unit. That was, I think, in 2018. Then we have the Financial Intelligence Authority. So the FIA is supposed to fight money laundering and terrorism financing. So for them, their main mandate is on financial intelligence, movement of illicit money and things like that. Then we have the Office of the Auditor General. That's supposed to conduct public audits and in all these government institutions. We have the PPDA, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority. Now that's mandated to combat corruption in public procurement. So issues of buying and selling public goods, that falls under the docket of the PPDA. Then we have the Directorate of Ethics and Integrity, then the Inspectorate of Government. We have currently other supporting agencies. There is the Leadership Code Tribunal. That's supposed to what can I call that word? Adjudicating over cases of declaration of assets by public officials. So issues of under-declaring, issues of delayed declaring of your wealth, it's now the tribunal, though the law is being implemented by the Inspectorate of Government. We also have the Anti-Corruption Court.
Yes.
That's the Anti-Corruption Division of the High Court. So that one deals strictly with cases of corruption. Then the DPP also plays a role when it comes to fighting corruption. That's the Directorate of Public Prosecution. Then under police, there is the CID department. But there are more, though some of them skip my mind. So we have so many agencies, actually.
All right. So then corruption shouldn't be a problem with all these agencies. I wonder why we are still lagging behind, according to some international reports. But what do you make of the newly released Inspectorate of Government report, having released information that local government and police are the most corrupt in Uganda currently?
That report, when it comes to ranking of institutions, it's normal under the National Integrity Survey.
Okay.
So the National Integrity Survey, it ranks what citizens believe the institutions, their actual perception of corruption, mainly based on bribery within most of these public institutions. So most of the studies, Inspectorate of Government and even our Transparency International study, it has always revealed that police is the most corrupt when it comes to bribery and corruption. And the reason mainly is that most of the citizens on the daily basis, they interact with police on the roads, when it comes to land cases, when it comes to issues of, all these criminal related everything, you'll always find the need to engage police. So in that way, police then by default becomes the leading. However, when it comes now to the actual money being taken by any of these institutions, in our report of the Uganda Bribery Index, then the judiciary takes lead. Because if you're to pay money to win a case, that means it has to be a huge sum. So when you look at the average size of bribe taken per institution, the judiciary was taking about 500,000 Ugandan shillings, while police, the average size was 50,000 per bribe. Then the local government, it's mainly in issues of licensing, issues in implementation of programs and all this. But also currently we have issues with NIRA, issues. You remember when we had the sagas of national IDs and all this. Then there are also rankings in the utilities, Umeme, National Water, and others. So the ranking mainly is based on bribery. However, when it comes now to the report of the Inspectorate of Government, it's by mandate that they have to report to Parliament semi-annually. So this one has been January to June report 2023, and it was mainly highlighting some of the cases they have investigated, the number of reports they have received, the amounts of money they have so far recovered, and things like that. But they have that mandate to always do it. Although I think the most outcry now is that when it comes to the actual numbers of reports they receive vis-a-vis the levels of corruption out there, I think the citizens feel that we still have a huge gap, because about 1,300 cases were received in the last reporting period, yet corruption is so rampant out there. But also when it comes to now the recovery, our citizens believe if you're collecting about 3 billion, that's very little money. Because most of these cases, investigating them, you require over 30 billion Ugandan shillings to successfully investigate most of the cases. So when you measure recovery vis-a-vis, the amount you put in to investigate the cases, I think it doesn't balance properly. However, the approach that the IG had taken is almost similar to the approach that civil society organizations had taken, and that was on the preventive approaches on corruption, as opposed to waiting for the corruption to happen and then you look for the money. Because in most of the cases, once corruption happens, it leaves no trace, so that money is gone. But also when you look at the cases of corruption that have happened previously, for example, the famous Katosi Road, it took over 8 years for a conviction to be made, and yet the recovery was the same amount that was lost then. So if the money was 22 billion, it was the same money that the court ordered to recover. However, if you know the cost of inflation, 22 billion in 2014 can be the same amount of money in 2022. So preventive approaches are being emphasized so that you get real-time value for money when it comes to implementing projects.
Okay, talking about money, what is the cost of corruption
in Uganda? There was a cost of corruption report by the Inspectorate of Government where it revealed that over 9 trillion, it's actually about 10 trillion Ugandan shillings, that's lost every year to corruption. So that money is lost in education, it's lost in health, it's lost in road works, it's lost in procurement delays, it's lost in all these other wasteful expenditures in government. But there's also another report from there's an institution called the Global Financial Integrity. That report revealed that Uganda will lose about 2 trillion Ugandan shillings in illicit financial flows. So illicit financial flows involves issues of smuggling of items, like you see things of gold, ivory and that. Then issues of tax evasion, also issues of corruption. So about 2 trillion Ugandan shillings is lost every year. Then there is another study, though this is slightly related to corruption, that's under the Ministry of Finance, and this was looking at the tax expenditures when we forgive the investors in unclear channels, and that was about 5 trillion Ugandan shillings lost annually. So if you compare those monies, you add the 5 trillion plus the 10 trillion plus the 2 trillion, that's the actual money we pay every year in debt financing. So I believe if we weren't losing so much in corruption, probably even our public expenditure would be a bit better, would be probably domestically financed than always having a rising debt burden.
Okay, so what can be done to mitigate the loss, that about 17 trillion loss that you have mentioned?
I think basically that calls for what can we do as anti-corruption partners to reverse the corruption trend. I'll start with the laws. Currently, what is being done is that, most of the corruption initially, especially when it comes to issues of illicit financial flows, it was hugely relating to companies. Issues of creative accounting, issues of creation of, they call them shell companies, and that network of companies, so that it's then very hard to know who is the beneficial owner. So when we say beneficial owner, they mean the natural person.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't be a legal person, but I'm a natural person. When it comes to law, a legal person can be a company, as you hide the real natural people behind. So now the current amendment requires every company to file its natural persons, and now those are the beneficial owners. So if I work with Transparency International, I can't use Transparency International anymore as a legal person. So they look at who are the actual owners of Transparency. So through that, we want to see who are these individuals taking up public procurements, who are these individuals benefiting from the tax exemptions, who are these individuals, involved in the movements of money across the globe. So with that, we believe, I think we shall see more recoveries, but we shall see also less and less losses, what they call hemorrhages in public revenue. Okay. But besides that, the IG also has that lifestyle audit campaign. Though it has not been well supported, but we believe if you link the lifestyle audit with the beneficial ownership transparency law, it gives you an advantage that you are able to know if this house is constructed, who is the actual owner of the house. So as people declare their wealth, you'll then look at the Companies Act declarations vis-a-vis what is declared, and then you're able to draw the matrix and know the people behind. So I believe if it's also supported, the lifestyle audit campaign, then probably these people stealing to invest will steal less. Then the Leadership Code Tribunal, where all public officials are required to declare their assets. Mm-hmm. It's also a good one, and now we have a tribunal in place. It has been around for effectively 2 years, though in practice it's 3 years.
Okay.
So that tribunal is supposed to provide quick time prosecution and of the declared, those inconsistencies in a declaration of assets. And most of the public corruption involves public officials. So we think if we implement properly the Leadership Code Act, most of the people in government will continuously steal less and less. But also now that takes us to how then can citizens access this information so that they are able to report. Mm-hmm. For example, currently it's very hard to access information on the declared assets. Yet you may have information on your local politician, and you'd want to flag it to the Inspectorate of Government. However, because you don't know what this person actually declared, it's very hard for you to participate. And for us, we request that it's time most of this information is published, so that by a click of the button we are able to know what our leaders are declaring and what they are not declaring, so that we can then flag it off. And then I think the missing link now will be the level of involvement of citizens in fighting corruption. We think it's still very low and minimal, but probably we can support it by giving these citizens more and more information, and also enhancing their capacity on how they can participate in fighting corruption. When it comes to the laws, we still believe we have the good laws, maybe the missing laws such as the witness protection, that if we put them in place, maybe it can be a great motivation factor in the citizens to report cases of corruption.
All right, maybe before we take a short break, I'll ask you about the Inspectorate of Government reports to Parliament. Do you have anything to say about those?
I think we have utilized them over time, and they always bring out some red flags, although it's more of a performance report, that this year we did so much, and this is how much we've been able to recover. This is the cases we've investigated and things like that.
Okay.
So some of the cases that are flagged, there are cases that require audit. For example, if a case comes through that probably there was poor implementation when it comes to a certain construction and all these delays, some of those cases require audit. And what happens is that there are times when you can't use these reports in isolation. So when the IG releases a report, then you have to wait and see what is now the Office of the Auditor General doing in terms of audit. Then you have to wait for now the parliamentary committees to discuss some of these reports so that then we actually come up with a result. However, when it comes to the IG report, like I said, some of them are like feedback on what has been done, what have they done in capacity building, what have they done in investigations, what is their level of success, and all these things.
Okay. Maybe let me ask before we go for a short break. According to the information you've given us, it's like citizens have a big part to play in the fight against corruption.
Sure.
Tell us about that.
Because from all our studies, it has always been revealed that corruption disproportionately affects the poor.
Yeah.
So between me and the local person in that community, there are things that will affect me, but then I can ably overcome them. For example, when it comes to access to education, we know we have free universal primary education. However, the citizens need it much, but me probably I can afford to pay school fees for my kids to have quality education in a certain institution of learning. So the thing is that if the citizens are not part of the fight, all this wastage will always affect them. When you see people dying in maternal, during giving birth, when you see the levels of dropouts, these are mainly the local persons in communities that couldn't afford the rising cost of education, or people who probably went to a school and the teachers were frequently absent and they didn't see the value of learning. So for us, why we say the fight against corruption revolves around the citizens is that even when it comes to now investing the proceeds of the corruption, nothing is invested in the moon. And we are all citizens. So everything that is invested, it's invested within our communities.
Okay.
So citizens have the information, but they also are the end-time beneficiaries of these resources that are normally lost. So if you don't flag it off, then that means you're shooting yourself in the foot. And that's why for us, all our campaigns, and even when you look at the past 4 years on our International Anti-Corruption Week campaigns, we've always revolved the discussion on citizens fight, citizens' mandate to fight corruption. And even this year's our theme also revolves around citizens. We believe it is their fight. If they give us information, we can act. But if they are silent, then we can't act against information we don't have.
Where are these citizens supposed to report?
Like I said, we have channels. For example, the State House Anti-Corruption Unit has a toll-free line. The Inspectorate of Government has different reporting channels, but they have also opened up regional offices where you can report. At Transparency International Uganda, we also have a toll-free line where we always encourage citizens to report anonymously. And why we made it toll-free is that we understand that most of the people that would love to report, probably they don't have the money to load airtime and call us. But maybe they also don't have access to mobile phones. So if you're to borrow a phone from a neighbor to report a case of corruption, you don't want to inconvenience that neighbor with again helping you to load airtime. So make it as free as possible for these citizens to report. But also, when you look at social media, for example, the recent exhibitions, it's also a channel where now you can just see something happening and then you just tag the respective agency involved. Okay. So if it is in roads, you just take a photo of the pothole, put it on Twitter, and then tag in UNRA. Because over time you've seen quicker responses using these channels than actually walking into the office of UNRWA and telling them, you know what, I saw a contractor stealing these materials. So these channels are always there to help citizens to report quickly and anonymously.
All right, from Transparency International, his name is David Kicito, and we are discussing the fight against corruption, or of course the anti-corruption basis on how exactly we are fighting corruption as a country, but also as individuals, and some different entities when it comes to government. For example, the Inspectorate of Government that released a report recently, and of course reports indicate that we lose over 17 trillion Uganda shillings in corruption per year, and that is a whole lot of money. If we can all fight corruption or get into the fight against corruption, this money can be saved. My name is Carol. We're taking a very short break and returning more with the issues at hand. Don't go away. There are a number of things on the menu of Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe that you can try out. For example, different continental dishes and cuisines from, of course, all over the world. They also have a swimming pool, a health club with the sauna and steam bath. After you gym a little bit, you go enjoy the sauna and steam bath. But also, they do have accommodation in case you want to sleep in with your friends and family. Welcome back to Issues at Hand. We're still discussing anti-corruption corruption or the lack of it. We hope for a day when we shall come here on air and tell you that corruption is no more in Uganda. And of course, like I've already told you, we lose about 17 trillion Uganda shillings every year to corruption. And of course, different agencies of government are working together with other agencies like Transparency International, where my guest is from, to fight this corruption. David, I would like to ask you about the statistics or number of cases reported by the IG, the number of cases of corruption.
Yeah, according to the IG's report, that's January to June 2023, the current ones. I think that there is always a slight difference. The change is always not so big. And currently, it's about 1,309 cases that were reported to the Inspectorate of Government. However, the report now breaks them down. Some cases of this is bribery, this is misuse, this is embezzlement. But that's the total of the cases in the current reporting period. And I think about 1,100 cases were sanctioned for investigations, so that means the cases actually hold water and they are worthy the IG's time. But also some of these cases are normally referred to other agencies like the DPP. For example, if a case comes and probably it involves land, it involves maybe criminal aspects, then it's flagged to other agencies. However, the total value of all these cases, the money involved, I think it was valued at about 500 billion. Wow. And the monies that were remitted to the Inspectorate of Government, about 3 billion. So this is the money they have at hand so far within the current period. So I think for now that's about the cases. Maybe going to the declaration, like we were discussing issues of the Leadership Code Tribunal. The report also shows that about 26,000 leaders declared their assets. And out of this, actually 32,000 were supposed to declare their assets. So it takes us back to the challenges within implementation. How timely can we enforce some of these anti-corruption measures to ensure that there is timely implementation but also quicker results? So when it comes to that, we've had about 10 convictions so far in the current reporting period from the cases we have seen, and administrative actions against the errant public officials. So these could include indictment, suspensions, and this. The report shows about 243 administrative actions. You know very well that the IG is also mandated with the ombudsman role. So that involves overseeing the performance of the public agencies. So they'll oversee recruitments, they'll oversee all these things. So if anything happens wrongly, they have that mandate besides fighting corruption to oversee and, take action.
Okay.
So what else can we look at this report? The compliance when it comes to declaration, it's at 81%. There's still a gap of about 18.6 in terms of compliance. And most of the people, I think, believe that the channel through which they declare are still so analog, and they believe maybe the IG should increase on how they digitalize. But I think the other missing link when it comes to declaration is the capacity of these institutions to undertake timely due diligence of the declarations, so that you don't wait for all the reports to be received, all the assets to be declared, and then you start investigating case by case. Because some people will under-declare and they'll go out with it, because now you see you have about 26,000 cases, and you have about not more than 500 workers that are supposed to investigate this. And when it comes to assets, most of our assets, people don't keep assets in their names. But also we don't have a digital asset inventory that you just click and you're able to know what David actually owns. So if you don't put in place that quick mechanisms to undertake due diligence in time, you can't get the results you want.
Okay. Are there repercussions for the people who don't declare their assets?
Yeah, they are.
Tell us
because
about this.
when you don't declare, when it comes to issues of corruption, there are issues of concealment. So if you conceal information, that means probably what you're concealing is a proceed of corruption. And remember, we want to see these public leaders, their assets, are they incommensurate with what we actually pay them? You'll take an example of the case of Jamwa, that he was able to pay for a suit in Serena for an entire year. You see, he had properties worth billions of shillings. He had a fleet of Range Rovers, you see, but his salary was known because he was a public official. So if you're to get these assets and compare them with what this individual is getting, so that's what the entire Leadership Code Act is about, that they want to see if your district chairperson receives 2.5 million and maybe you add on his allowance and his monthly pay comes to about let's say 10 million. How comes he owns a hotel of 10 billion and this hotel is not a proceed of a loan? You get it? So the repercussions are that you risk forfeiting the assets you haven't declared. And then now government is supposed to put in place an asset recovery mechanism on how they now manage the recovered assets from all these individuals. And there are figures where in some places assets have been recovered, and this money, the assets are either auctioned or they are managed by government.
Okay.
So there are repercussions.
Those are the current recoveries that we are seeing?
Yeah, the recoveries are sometimes financial or they are in terms of material. Cars, land, property, housing, and things like that.
What if the people doing the search or people from anti-corruption
Yes.
Recovering assets wrongfully? For example, somebody maybe owns something rightfully and
Yes.
the state got it wrong and recovered those assets. Do you have those cases?
I may not point to any specific cases currently. However, that's normally unlikely because now when it comes to prosecuting corruption, it's very unlikely that they will wrongfully attach property, because after evaluating the laws, then the government has to come up with an asset recovery plan and also a management plan. How are we going to deal with these proceeds? So if you have a house and it has not been declared, that means you're benefiting from illicit wealth. So any public official who has illicit wealth, that means it has to be given back to government. But also, the thing is that if you're conducting clean business, there is always a trail. The only business that doesn't leave a trail in Uganda is maybe agriculture, because it is untaxed. So someone can easily tell you that I sold my goats and cows and I got 10 billion. I think we've had that before. So that's the only business that doesn't leave behind a trail. But in all these other businesses, at least there are elements of tax remittances, there are issues of maybe invoicings and all this. So if you say you build this property or you bought it, but URA doesn't have your records, that means that's a proceed of corruption. So there is an increasing level of coordination with these other agencies. For example, when it's on asset tracking, IG will consult URA. They will be like, this gentleman says he did this business and this, but your tax record, when do they start against his businesses? And probably they're about 1 year ago, and your empire runs for over 10 years. So that's already a red flag that these are proceeds of corruption.
All right. How about, when you compare reports from July to December 2022, and now this one from January to June 2023, you notice that January to June, there's been more corruption than last year. So my question would be, what should the IG do? What should the IG do, the Inspectorate of Government do, to combat corruption?
I think starting with the first one, normally some cases of corruption are driven by the fiscal landscape. For example, there are times when government is overspending. I know when it comes now to that period of overspending, sometimes you have lots of anomalies. You flow procurement regulations. You have all those issues into play. Sometimes, there are issues of misinvoicing. There are issues of rushed payments. There are instances where some of these, especially local government agencies, but also other spending agencies, receive monies towards the end of the financial year. So they are quick at spending to ensure that, their accounts are not swept. So when it comes to some of those cycles, you tend to realize that there are lots of issues that then relate to corruption. However, when it comes to now the mandate of the Inspectorate of Government on how it can strengthen its work, the first one is strengthening its coordination with all other partners and maybe players. For example, how does the Inspectorate of Government bring on the civil society? Because IG has not more than, I can't remember the number of offices, but they have a few regional offices. I think there is one in Mukono, Greater Masaka, the whole of it has one office. So the offices are very few, but the catchment area is very big. So you want then to look at how you bring on board partners that will then help you get some of this information, so that you don't have to be almost everywhere, because then you'll end up being nowhere. But also coordination will help in ensuring that the figures you have at the Inspectorate of Government speak to the figures at the Uganda Revenue Authority, and they are the same figures with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, and that's the same figures with the PPDA. Then it becomes quicker to prosecute and investigate corruption. But also there's always an issue of capacity and resources, and we have to agree that the monies that these institutions have on investigating and prosecuting corruption, then it's not actually enough. Because when you look at how much we lose, 17 trillion, but the Inspectorate of Government gets an annual budget of not more than 70 billion. That means we are not investing, as much as we should be investing, and that also hampers with the results that we should actually be having. But also, the other one is that the way we motivate the whistleblowers, I think, should be improved. URA has a quick benefit scheme. You bring on a case of probably tax evasion and maybe 100 million is involved, you have a 5%. Or I think currently it has been capped to not more than 100 million. So that's your sure deal. Whether the case goes through or not, you are assured of that. So that's why you see that there are always more people willing to report cases of tax evasion to Uganda Revenue Authority. And we think the same quick time measure should be put at the IG, so that if someone sees a contractor misusing, resources, he will quickly report to the IG, and as soon as the IG is able to evaluate the sums of monies involved, this whistleblower is quickly, compensated. Okay. The provision is there, but very few Ugandans have benefited from it. And we think the more we publicize it and make people aware of it, but also implement that provision of motivating and rewarding whistleblowers, I think more and more will come out to report cases of corruption.
Okay, I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap up the conversation and give us your last words in regards to the fight against corruption.
In my last seconds, I'll say the fight against corruption requires the participation of all of us. We are all citizens, we are all Ugandans, we all pay taxes, and we want to see an ultimate value for our taxes. And that's in terms of the quality of public services that we enjoy. You can always call us on our toll-free line at TI. I can share it with the host and then they'll flag it to you. But we also have our open social media channels. Twitter is always open. It's at TI Uganda 1. You can always send us info and we see how to coordinate on issues of corruption.
Thank you. All right. From himself, David Kicito at Transparency International in the fight against corruption. You can always reach out on their Twitter at TI Uganda. Yeah, that's it?
Yes, at TI Uganda 1.
TI Uganda 1 on Twitter, and report any cases of corruption. My name is Carol. Thank you so much for being a part of Issues at Hand every morning. We will be here tomorrow, same time, same station, to bring you the best of the issues about current affairs. We are powered by Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe. Good morning. God bless you.